Hello everyone, welcome to lecture 34. This is part of module 10 and today we will talk about the drought. So, this is the first part of lecture 34, that is on introduction to drought. So, when we talk about this drought, immediately you will have this kind of picture in your mind. You will imagine scenario where there is no water and the surfaces with the cracks and all the vegetation or the plants are dried, right. So, that is true. So, when we talk about drought, it is a prolonged period of abnormally low rainfall resulting in a shortage of water, and this water shortage, it can be atmospheric water, it can be surface water, or it can be groundwater. So, if you refer to any standard literature, this is the definition. So, droughts are hydroclimatic extreme events that lead to prolonged period of water scarcity impacting agriculture production and food security, because ultimately when there is a drought, it will affect the agriculture, and once you have the agriculture impact, then you will have the food insecurities, right. So, causes of the droughts, it can be because of irregular monsoon pattern, it can be because of the depletion of groundwater, it can be deforestation, land degradation and soil erosion, urbanization and encroachments, right. And the last one is the climate change. So, because of the climate change or any of these reasons, there will be shortage of water in a given area, and it can be atmospheric, surface and groundwater, right. When we refer India, it has varied landscape, inconsistent rainfall, intensified the severity and frequency of droughts, leading to significant scarcity in the 19th and 20th century. So, here you can see the southwest monsoon in 2020, this is from IMD, right, and here you can see how these waves are coming, right, and the dates are also written here. So, the southwest monsoon, which accounts for 80% of the India's annual rainfall, is the primary source of agriculture water and groundwater recharge. Because of this southwest monsoon, we will have the precipitation on rainfall, and 80% of this rainfall, it is coming because of the southwest monsoon, right. So, the weakening of the southwest monsoon driven by Indian Ocean warming and the El Nino or Southern Oscillation, so we call it ENSO, is a major contributor to drought in the country. So, here we will try to learn about the El Nino, we will see what it is and how it is impacting India particularly, and how we are having the drought condition in our country, right. So, we will focus on this El Nino Southern Oscillation ENSO. So, if you just refer to this map, and this map is used here to show the location, right. So, here this is the Pacific Ocean, right. So, this is also Pacific Ocean, it goes like this. So, the currents are generated here in the Pacific Ocean, right, and this will come to India, right. So, this Pacific Ocean has this warm current and the cold currents, right. What happens when we have the El Nino, right. So, when we refer to El Nino, you see the map, warmer than average. So, this Pacific Ocean, it is warmer than the average, right. And when we refer to the other phenomena, which is La Nina, that is colder than the average, right. So, what happens? Remember this, El Nina is hotter, La Nina is colder, right. Now, we will again refer to our map, right. So, here what is happening, if we refer to El Nino, the hotter currents are generated, which is coming here, right. Now, when we are having the hotter currents, and particularly from May to June, July, right, India is hot, the temperature is more here. So, what happens when there is a temperature high in India, the air will go upward, right, because of the light. So, if you refer to this La Nina and El Nino effect, so here when we are referring this El Nino, the hotter currents are generated, which is reaching to this portion, and then we are referring to May, June. So, in May, June the weather is hot, so air will be lifted upward, right, and the same time the ocean is also hot, right. So, what will happen? There will be no monsoon in this particular region, right. So, because of that we will be facing the drought condition, there will be less rainfall if there is El Nino. So, here you can see difference from average temperature. So, here it is hotter, right, and La Nina it is colder. Now, what happens? The weather does not stop here. Now, after this El Nino, right, there will be La Nina, it follows the El Nino, right. So, this La Nina, that will be next year to this El Nino. So, that time this is hot and this is cold, right. So, this difference, what will happen? Here the air is hot, here the air or the ocean is cold. So, what will happen? The monsoon will be pushed very drastically to this region, right. So, that time we will have the flood situation. So, you need to understand this El Nino and La Nina. So, in El Nino you have this dry condition, in La Nina you have wet condition, and because of that we generally experience the drought and flood scenario in our country, right. I hope this concept is clear. India is highly vulnerable to drought, with approximately 2/3 of its area prone to such event. You can see many news articles have been published, many standard literature papers have been published on this particular problem. As an agriculture dominant country and home to a very large population, drought significantly impact agriculture productivity, water resource management and socio-economic well-being, because everything is linked to water. We will see how it is. In recent decades, there has been a noticeable rise in the frequency, severity and duration of droughts, a trend that is expected to worsen due to climate change, right. The increasing food demand from a growing population and urbanization, combined with unsustainable groundwater extraction, further amplifies the challenges posed by droughts. So, if we classify this impacts of drought, we have three categories. The first one is the economic impacts, then we have social impact and then environmental impact. The direct and indirect impact of drought can vary depending on the region, the severity of the drought and the existing socio-economic conditions. So, let us talk about the economic impact. Drought induced economic losses include reduced production in agriculture, livestock, fisheries, timber and dairy sector, because water is needed everywhere in day to day life. In many of our activities water is must, right. Declines in agriculture dependent industries increase unemployment, strain financial institutions and raise water transport cost. Because of that you will have high cost to water. Development of new water resources further adds to economic burden. Distressed sale of personal and agriculture asset lead to amplifies obligations, severely affecting weaker population segments, right. So, those the people in the poor sector or in the poor category, that will be impacted majorly. Then let us see the social impact of drought. Droughts disrupt social structure and relationships, particularly in rural communities. Joint family system often disintegrate and occupational diversification becomes a necessity. Social losses are evident in increased conflicts, weakened family solidarity, migration and shift in settlement pattern can be seen easily, right. Resource depletion such as scarce water, grass and fodder exacerbate tensions among agro-pasture groups, right. In some cases, entire villages have faced issues like blocked road, buried home and silting of water ponds. So, this is a major problem in the rural sector. Then let us see the environmental impacts. Increased fallow lands and barren areas reduce crop intensity and lead to wind erosion and shifting sand dunes, because the water is required to maintain the soil moisture, right, and the soil moisture is needed not only for agriculture, also to sustain the soil in their own position. Soil erosion due to wind and water loss, decreased groundwater level and increased turbidity in river and lakes affect ecosystem and agriculture, right. Agriculture we have already talked about. Now let us see the ecosystem, how it is impacting the ecosystem, because we all know the ponds, lake, river, everywhere we have the aquatic life, right. And once your source is less and the water availability is less, then what happens? Slowly the ecosystem of that particular fluvial system will be disturbed, right. Reduced moisture in soil kills plant root, while wetlands dry up affecting the riparian species. Dust storm, reduced precipitation and dry air concentrate pollutants causing respiratory ailments. Wildlife stress lead to disease and displacement, with some animal migrating to human settlements. That we can easily see, many times the wildlife are reported in the settlements, right. So, those are the extreme scenarios. Now, let us see the classification of drought. What are the different types of drought? So, we have hydrological drought, then we have meteorological drought, then agriculture drought, and finally, we will also see socio-economic drought, because it starts with meteorological, then we have hydrological, then agriculture and then socio-economic. Let us see one by one all of them. When we talk about the meteorological drought, this is the earliest stage and is primarily defined by a precipitation deficiency. It is the foundation upon which other type of drought develops, because that is the input. If you remember the water balance equation, our input is the precipitation, just ignore the snow melt, right. So, when we are talking about this meteorological drought, our precipitation is less in a given area, and subsequently this will act as a foundation to other types of drought, right. Then you have hydrological drought. It occurs when meteorological drought leads to a deficit in water supply affecting surface and subsurface water resources like river, lakes and groundwater. So, here when we talk about the hydrological, it is mainly because of the shortage of water in the surface and subsurface zones, right. Agriculture drought, now you have seen the meteorological, hydrological, now you can visualize how it will be impacting the agriculture sector. So, this type of drought is characterized by soil moisture deficits, which leads to crop stress and impact agriculture production. It is closely linked to both meteorological and hydrological drought, because some of the crops they require good soil moisture during the initial phase, right. Some of the crops they require high amount of water in their mature state. So, depending upon the type of drought and the what type of crop you have, we will have or we will experience the agriculture drought. Then comes the socio-economic drought. This is the broadest category and refers to the impacts of drought on society and the economy. It occurs when meteorological, hydrological or agriculture droughts affect the supply and demand of economic goods and services in the given region, right. So, when we talk about this meteorological drought, it is a complex phenomena influenced by regional and temporal factors, right. Meteorological droughts is defined as a lack of precipitation over a region for a period of time, commonly analyzed using precipitation data. Drought is considered as precipitation deficit with respect to the average value of that particular region, right. Remember this, it is not with the other area. With respect to the average value of precipitation of the same area, we try to analyze and then we will identify the drought. Several studies use monthly precipitation data to analyze drought. Some approaches focus on drought duration and intensity in relation to cumulative precipitation shortage, right. So, this meteorological droughts, remember it is region specific. Now, I have an example for you. Here you can see this is two different areas, one is desert, another one is having very good vegetation, right. In both the areas, if we have 50 centimeter of annual rainfall, whether both will be fine? No. For this desert, maybe this is with respect to the average precipitation, this is good and there is no drought condition. But for the other reason, here with average rainfall of that particular area, 50 centimeter may be very, very less. So, this area will be qualifying the criteria of drought, right. Drought is region specific. Level of precipitation and dryness duration must be compared with the regional normal. This is what I explained in the previous slide. Considerable variation in atmospheric condition lead to differences in precipitation deficiencies, right. Different time scale contribute to variability in meteorological drought occurrence. It is measured in terms of seasons, years or decades of deficient precipitation. The duration of meteorological drought affects soil moisture, influences water supply in stream, shallow groundwater table, small lakes and reservoirs. Understanding drought through precipitation analysis helps in better water resource management, because once we have the meteorological drought, that means rainfall is less, then comes the management of the water resources in that particular region, and for that we need to understand the drought condition. Then comes the hydrological drought. It is generally defined on watershed or river basin scale, right. It measures the effects of periods of deficient precipitation on surface and subsurface water supply such as stream flow, reservoirs, lakes and groundwater levels, right. So, here you can see for a given catchment you can perform the drought analysis. Although all drought originates with a deficiency in precipitation, hydrological drought specifically refers to a water supply shortage caused by rainfall deficit over a watershed or river basin. While meteorological drought is characterized by reduced rainfall and agriculture drought affects soil moisture and crop growth, hydrological drought is associated with long term declines in surface and groundwater levels. Hydrological drought is specifically related to inadequate water for established water uses including domestic, agriculture and industrial purposes. When precipitation remains below average for an extended period, the effects of hydrological droughts become evident in the declining levels of surface and subsurface water resources. This impact can vary significantly based on different water uses pattern and regional characteristic, because the different areas have different demands, because if you refer to a rural sector or urban sector or maybe a industrial sector, the water requirement is different, right. Factor influencing hydrological droughts include climatic patterns, land use and human water consumption, right. Regression analysis has shown that the geological composition, right. So, what is the geology of that area plays a significant role in determining the severity of the hydrological drought. The ability of soil and rock formation to store and release water affects how quickly a region experiences water shortage during prolonged dry spells. So, depending upon your geology, whether the rocks are permeable, impermeable, what types of soil we have and what is the status of the water resources, whether we have sufficient water to continue till next 6 months or 3 months to meet the demand of that particular area, we will have different measures, right. Hydrological drought has serious implications for water resource management, as it can lead to shortage in drinking, water supplies, reduced agriculture productivity and impact on energy production. Since hydrological drought develops over time, because this is not one day job, right. So, many times we do not get the rainfall, but we never say that it is a drought condition, because next day or maybe next few days rain will come, right. So, long term monitoring and planning are essential for mitigating its effect. Hydrological drought is often analyzed with stream flow data, as changes in stream flow level provide a measurable indications of prolonged dry period. Understanding the geological and the catchment characteristic is very important. It will help to predict and manage hydrological drought more effectively, right. So, this groundwater drought occurs when reduced, it is within the hydrological drought. Here specifically we are talking about the groundwater. So, it occurs when reduced precipitation lead to a decline in groundwater recharge, followed by decreasing groundwater level and discharge. These drought typically develops over a month to years, making them a long term water scarcity issues. So, if it takes a long period of time to develop, and similarly it will take time to overcome through this particular problem. Groundwater drought is often defined by a drop in groundwater level, but it can also be measured through changes in groundwater storage, recharge and discharge. So, we can also monitor the storage, recharge and discharge pattern of a particular area. Negative impacts of groundwater depletion can be felt long before total shortage, right, affecting water availability for various uses. Now comes the agriculture drought. So, here you can see these photographs that will help you to understand what we mean by agriculture drought. So, it occurs when declining soil moisture lead to water stress in crop, affecting their growth and yield. Its impact depends on the magnitude, duration and timing of the drought, along with soil, plant and animal response to water stress, because this is a stress condition for plants also. So, whether they will be able to manage with less water, so that depends upon the type of the crop. Insufficient topsoil moisture at planting can hinder germination, resulting in low plant population and reduced yield. This is one of the example. Drought is the later stage of crop development, can destroy or severely deplete crop yield. The impact of drought varies depending upon the biological characteristic of crop, their growth stage and soil properties. As I said, depending upon the type of the soil, whether the soil is porous or permeable, right. So, how much amount of moisture they can hold, that will help the plant to overcome through this situation. Soil moisture declines is influenced by meteorological and hydrological drought factors, as well as differences between actual and potential evapotranspiration. This evapotranspiration is also an input in the agriculture drought assessment. Plant water demand is affected by weather condition, plant characteristic, what type of plant it is, growth stage, whether it is in the initial stage, middle stage or the mature state, and the soil properties. Several drought indices combining precipitation, temperature and soil moisture have been developed to analyze agriculture drought, right. So, here you can see the socio-economic drought. This table gives you the daily water consumption and this is the time. Socio-economic drought occurs when the water supply is insufficient to meet human and environmental needs. It emerges when meteorological, hydrological and agriculture droughts impact the supply and demand of water. So, here the situation will be something like this. This can be linked to the failure of water resource system to meet growing water demand. Human and animal population, growth rate, water and fodder requirement and severity of crop failure are important parameters to assess the socio-economic drought. Here you can see some of the cases. So, here when water supply is greater than water demand, so we have surplus water and this is excess supply. When water supply is equal to water demand, it is in the equilibrium, right. When water demand is greater than water supply, then this is the excess demand. So, this will be the vulnerable situation and this is what we are talking about, the drought condition. Drought management is a continuous cycle which affect phases that involve monitoring and assessment to ensure a timely response. The drought management includes mitigation, preparedness, relief assistance and reconstruction, right. Each phase plays a crucial role in minimizing the impact of drought. And the mitigation phase, here you have proactive measures, community development, contingency planning, capacity building, infrastructure development, that comes under this proactive measures. Drought preparedness and mitigation can be accomplished with soil and water conservation and management, right. Conservation practices minimize the disruption of the soil structure, composition and natural biodiversity, thereby reducing erosion and soil degradation, surface runoff and water pollution. this water pollution is also one of the major impact after the drought condition. It can be achieved through agronomic and engineering measures. So, we have some mitigation measures: crop rotation, contoured row crop, terrace farming, tillage practices, erosion control structure, water retention and detention structure, reclamation of salt affected soil. So, you might be familiar with this crop rotation. So, we try to use different types of crop in a year, so that the soil will become more fertile, and depending upon the water availability we will use the appropriate crop type. And here contoured row cropping, here tillage farming, this is one of the example, then tillage practices. So, with this I will end this part 1 of lecture 34, and we will continue this in the next part. Thank you. Thank you.